I'd like to begin, if I can, with a very famous story of a great Kabbalist who lived a few hundred years ago that most people probably heard of. In English, his name was the Master of the Good Name, one of the names of God. The Master of the Good Name, known also as the Baal Shem Tov. And there are books and books published that have amazing miracle stories about the Baal Shem Tov. And there's one I'd like to talk about tonight to begin with, because it's, I think, quite profound. The Baal Shem Tov was on his deathbed, and he gathered all his closest students around him, and he told them what they are to do to spread Kabbalah, to spread the teachings of the Zohar throughout the world in their life. There was one gentleman who came over to him, a close student, and he said, what am I going to do? He's hoping to be something great, powerful, teaching, lecturing, maybe being in business to make all kinds of money, and he can help spread the wisdom. And the Baal Shem Tov told him, your job is to tell stories. I want you to travel throughout the world and tell stories about me. All the miracle stories. I'm not going to make a lot of money, but to be asked by the Baal Shem Tov, my master, to tell stories, okay, it'll be a privilege. So he traveled for years. He was broke. He had to eat in people's homes when he told stories, and years went by, and he enjoyed telling the stories, but he couldn't figure out what was the meaning behind this, what was the purpose of his life, until he heard that there was a rich man in Italy. I forget the name of the village, and this man promised to pay, a lot of money for each story that could be told about the Baal Shem Tov. He figured, this is my pay dirt. This is why he told me to tell the story. So he traveled to Italy, and he went to this gentleman's home on the Shabbat, Friday night dinner. He said, I have all the stories you want to hear about the Baal Shem Tov. The guy was mesmerized. He said, amazing. We'll do the services, we'll sit down, we'll have dinner, you'll share your stories with everybody. They're sitting down for the first meal of Shabbat. The host says to him, please share your stories with our guests. And he can't remember a single story. Nothing. He's embarrassed. He's red-faced. He says, I'm sorry, maybe from the traveling, I can't remember. So the rich man says, listen, don't worry about it. Tomorrow morning, after the Torah reading, we'll have second meal. You'll tell your stories then. Second meal comes. Everybody's waiting with bated breath to hear the stories. And he begins and can't remember a single story. Same thing happens at the third meal. Shabbat ends, the guy's heartbroken, embarrassed, humiliated. He let this man down. He's got no money for himself for the stories. He can't figure out why he couldn't remember. And the man said, don't worry about it. I understand. You lost your memory. It's not a big deal, but thank you for spending the Shabbat with us. And the man left. He's on his horse and carriage. He's in this village, and he's a good 2-3 hours away from the Baal Shem Tov's home. And he sees in the village a house, and it's all boarded up. Windows are boarded up, everything. And a story comes to him. And he debated, should I go back and tell him? He says, I have to. He's going to think I was a fake, a phony, something but the money anymore. I have to go back and tell him this story. So even though it's great hardship to travel all the way back, he goes back, knocks on the guy's door. The man opens the door, and his eyes are bloodshot. He says, listen, I have good news. I remember the story, but I remember the beginning. I remember the end. I don't know the middle. He says, get in the house. I want to hear the story. I don't care. Even a partial story is better than nothing. So they sit down, and this is the story he told. He said, once I was with my master, my teacher, the Baal Shem Tov, and he had us travel to a village, because they used to travel everywhere to bring protection and light and energy to different regions throughout Europe, because there was a lot of pogroms and persecutions, and so they would travel to different places. So he says, one day we traveled to one village, and all the homes were boarded up. So the Baal Shem Tov stopped the horse and carriage, we all got out, we knocked on one door, we went inside, and we said, what's going on in this town? Why are all the windows and doors boarded up? And the homeowner said, there's a persecution taking place. The bishop and the army they're going to literally cause a massacre here, and we're all protecting ourselves. So the Baal Shem Tov said to me, the guy says to the rich man, says to me, go out there and you call the bishop and tell him the Baal Shem Tov wants to see him now. Well, I was afraid, the guy says. There was 1,000 soldiers, crowds of people, but I had to go. So I went out there, and it was like the parting of the Red Sea. All the townsfolk spread apart. I went up to the bishop, and I said, excuse me. I thought he was going to kill me right on the spot. I said, but the Baal Shem Tov, the great Kabbalist, wants to see you in that house. Well, the bishop looks at me and says, you tell him if he wants to see me, come see me. So I went back, he said, and I told my master, I said, he won't come, he wants you to go to see him. So the Baal Shem Tov said to me, no, you tell him this is the last time. Go back out there, you tell him to come see me right now. My heart was pounding, the guy says. I went back out there, everyone's looking at me, the army's there loaded with their knives and swords and weapons. And I went to the bishop, I said, the Baal Shem Tov wants to see you now. And I was stunned because the guy came. So I'm now walking with the bishop, and we're walking through the crowd, and we go into the home. And then the Baal Shem Tov took the bishop into this private room. They had a conversation. Next thing I know, maybe an hour later, the bishop comes out. His eyes are all bloodshot, and he calls off the whole massacre. That's all I remember of the story. Well, the wealthy man starts to break down and cry. He says, I was the bishop. He said, I was born a Jew, I was an Israelite, I converted, I assimilated. I wanted to show that I was a true enemy of the Israelite nation, and I ordered this massacre to take place. And then when I came to see your teacher, your master, he opened up something inside of me. He gave me a little Kabbalistic wisdom. He showed me the true light, and I changed my mind, and I begged him for forgiveness. And I cried and I cried and I begged and I begged. And I said, how will I know when I'm forgiven? And the Baal Shem Tov said, when someone comes along in your life and tells you this story, you'll know you're forgiven. So when you came to my house and couldn't remember, I knew I didn't do enough yet. So when you left my home after Shabbat, I was begging. I opened up my Zohar. I was begging. I was praying. I was crying with God. You came back to my door, and you came and told me the story. So there are many books with similar profound stories about the Baal Shem Tov and the miracles of the great Kabbalists. And the reason we tell these stories, and this is the important part, so pay attention. You have a prayer in your life that's not getting answered. You're praying for somebody else who needs a prayer answered. You try Zohar, you try Shabbat, you try Rosh Hashanah, you try all the technologies, not religion. We try all the technologies of this path of Kabbalah, and you're still not getting an answer? The Kabbalist said, you know how you get an answer? Just tell a story of the great Kabbalists of history, and that miracle story will answer your prayer. So tonight, we're going to share stories, not about a Kabbalist who lived in the past, but about my teacher, who's alive today, thank God, Bli Hara. And in our generation, we will see the arrival of immortality, though we may not know what that means right now, but we will see the arrival of immortality because we're going to share some miracle stories tonight about Kabbalist Rav Berg. And you are here for one reason, to get your prayers answered through the power of hearing these stories.